Hey, what up writers? I'm Violet, a writer and aspiring author, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the writing craft book on Writing and World Building by Timothy Hickson. Okay, to preface this review a little bit, I was looking for a book on world building when I wanted to get more into working on some of my higher and epic fantasy stories. I actually picked this up a little bit under false pretenses, thinking it was solely a world building book. My bad, the title is literally on writing and world building. I had actually been very familiar with the author Timothy Hickson because of his YouTube channel, Hello Future Me. I've been just subscribed to that channel and followed it for quite a while now, and I knew about this book and I knew about his on writing series that he had on his channel. So I actually went looking for this book when I wanted to get something on world building because I was already familiar with it. I knew that he had said on his channel that this was pretty much just the book form of his videos with a little bit of extra content and a little bit different formatting, but I decided to go up ahead and pick it up anyways, and I'm glad I did. I do have some salty opinions on this one, but we're gonna dive all into that. It's kind of hard doing these book reviews because I have so many thoughts like rambling in my head and I want to have some structure to it. So I think I'm just going to go over sort of a general overview of what this is, then I'll get into my salty opinions, then my favorite parts of the book, and then just the closing thoughts. This book is sort of split into the two sections, the on writing section and the on world building section. And the writing section is like all these parts, and then the world building is just this tiny part. But I actually have to say the writing stuff was very much geared towards sci-fi and fantasy writers. So if you're a sci-fi fantasy writer looking for a craft book that's sort of geared towards those genres, this is a good one to pick up. One good thing about this book was that it used a variety of examples, ranging from film and movies, books from all different areas, also video games, just a very wide variety of examples, which I always appreciate in a craft book. Also, it did list before every section what the examples were going to be, so if something was to be spoiled, it was kind of known upfront what examples were being used, and I always appreciate that in a craft book. Being that I was sort of very familiar with his videos, I did actually go and binge some of the on writing series before I decided to buy this. I had a lot of that content fresh in my head, so I was kind of going in thinking, is this just exactly like his videos were, or is there something more there? And I have to say I found something more there. Even though like his hard and soft magic system videos I had probably seen at least 3 times each, I still got a lot out of this, and I don't know if it's that he had added extra things or just framing it differently in this format, but I got a lot out of it even though I had been familiar with the videos. At the beginning, he kind of prefaces it by saying like, yeah, he doesn't like should and being told what to do, and liked to kind of give readers their own sort of elasticity with advice. And I think, my personal opinion, you should always take craft books like that, take what's useful and leave what's not. And I like that he prefaced the story by saying that. And he also kind of in the beginning talked a little bit about sort of meta YouTube stuff, and me having my channel and being like a YouTube addict and binging all these other YouTubers. It was cool, you know, kind of him talking about the writing community on YouTube, and I think he even used the term AuthorTube and called out a few channels and referenced a few channels. And at first I thought that was kind of weird because, you know, people who just pick this up, see it on Amazon and pick it up and don't know anything about this world maybe would be turned off by that. But on the other hand, maybe we would introduce them to this community, and YouTube is a great writing resource. It's very much, if you've seen Timothy's videos, it's very much sort of his voice and his way of speaking comes through into this format. Sometimes I think it works, and other times it wasn't exactly my thing. So let's get right into some of my issues I had with this and some of my salty opinions. I'm going to just start off with some of the kind of smaller nitpicky things, like the formatting. He is a big fan of footnotes. He used a lot of footnotes, and a lot of them I found kind of unnecessary, just sort of clarifying things that didn't need to be clarified about some of the examples. I did, however, like when he used the footnotes for humor. When I would see that there was something and I had to go down and check and would get a punchline of a joke, I actually kind of appreciated that. Another thing that I didn't really care for this was sort of the accessibility and clarity of his writing style, that he writes in a very sort of, no, I don't want to say pretentious, but sort of convoluted, these long, beautiful, rambly sentences, which sometimes in a craft book I just really want clear and concise advice or tips or information, where in this he kind of sort of rambles around the idea a lot of the times, and I didn't really appreciate that. But I can see where, as this is geared towards sci-fi and fantasy writers, that some of those people would also be readers and kind of be used to this sort of way of big flashy sentences with a lot of $3 words put in there. But for me, as like a YA writer and thinking of more maybe younger or newer writers, it maybe kind of makes you feel stupid. I'm going to be honest, there are some sentences that I had to read 2 or 3 times to be kind of like, what is he trying to say here? Because he kind of just sort of dances around the point with these long rambly sentences. There was also just a few, 1 or 2 little things in there that I kind of, like, I would put in the category of like things I would have flagged if I was a beta reader for this. And one was that he did these summaries at the end of each section, which I actually really appreciated. I love a summary at the end of a section to sort of get a bullet pointed list. I'm a fan of a good bullet pointed list. But he did this in a kind of a weird way, where in a lot of them he would have like 1, 2, and 3 like bullet pointed, but then each sentence would start with firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly, fifthly. So it was kind of repetitive to me, say like number 1, firstly, number 2, secondly. Like it was unnecessary, and he did the same thing in several of them, but he didn't do it in all the summaries. So it was kind of like a give and a take. I don't know, if he kind of would have stuck with that weird format the whole way, I could have almost understood it, but since he did it on and off, it didn't make sense to me. The thing is, when you're writing a writing craft book, this is geared towards writers who are going to notice those things, and it's going to kind of feel a little bit off-putting. So now I'm going to get into another thing that I didn't really like. There was this one section where he was referencing the movie Atonement as an example, which I think is cool. Also using something like a historical drama movie as an example and not just sci-fi and fantasy, or like I said, he had good examples, but he was talking about the sort of long sweeping shot of the beach and how the smart viewer would know that it was talking about Dunkirk. And I really didn't appreciate that language of saying a smart viewer. I kind of really, it was one of those moments where I threw the book down and was kind of like, really? You have to go there? Like, somebody's not smart because they don't know this niche World War II battle that took place. Like, I don't expect somebody with a public school education to be familiar with Dunkirk and be able to know from that shot that it's, I don't know. And I'm somebody who did know that, and I was familiar with Atonement. I knew that in that scene. So I guess I would have been considered a smart viewer, but even something like that, it's just really unnecessary. And I'm not even going to give him an example on how to fix it, because he did a much better thing later on in the book when he was talking about a speech that I believe was somewhere in the Marvel universe that had been referencing a speech from World War II. And he did it much better, where he said the informed reader would know. And it's like he could have done the same thing there and just said the informed viewer would know, or somebody in the know, and not have to do that. I don't know, those kind of little things like that really rub me the wrong way, where you kind of very much distance the reader or put down the reader, especially since it was already sort of, for me, sort of this accessibility issue with these long sentences kind of making the reader feel dumb in a way, and then kind of having a thing like that to sort of reaffirm that. I didn't really care for that. And now I'm going to get into my one big nitpick of the whole book that really tainted everything for me, where I almost stopped reading at this point. It's in the magic systems and storytelling section. That was my least favorite section of the whole book because I don't think it was necessary. I think most of it was unnecessary information, and the stuff that was necessary could have been sandwiched into one of the other 2 world or magic system sections that he had. And so he has this paragraph, and what he's trying to say, it's like a really thick paragraph, it's this big. And what he's trying to say is sort of beware of world builderitis. You know, don't forget about your internal, external plots and get wrapped up in the world building. But he says all these very, again, long turnaroundy sentences where it's very unclear, why can't he just come out and say that? Like, I don't know why. My bigger issue with it is that he very much shades self-publishing in this sentence, which I thought was extremely hypocritical, because this is a self-published book, and Timothy, as being somebody who already kind of probably is aware of the stigmas around self-publishing, and as a YouTuber knows the stigma around being a YouTuber publishing a book, he's in that minority. He's in that space already of these negative stereotypes around these kind of writers and those kind of books. And I just thought that was extremely unnecessary, to kind of alluding that he's read a lot of self-published books that are kind of guilty of doing this world builderitis and the author spending too much time on the world building. That really rubbed me the wrong way. I'm somebody who is actually pursuing traditional publishing. That's my dream, that's my path. I don't have a dog in the self-publishing fight, but I don't know, that one, it really rubbed me the wrong way, because I think personally, if you want to write a book that's really world building heavy, self-publishing could be a great path for that, because in self-publishing it has sort of the advantage of being able to really target specific readers, and there are readers who pick up books for in-depth world building and read books for world building, and I think books like that can thrive in self-publishing. And also, there's plenty of traditionally published books that have bad world building or convoluted world building. So it was just completely unnecessary and hypocritical and really tainted the book for me. So I am going to end up giving this book a positive review, but if you decide to pick it up, just go to page 132 and rip that out of your book. You don't need it. We don't need that negativity in our lives. So let's get into some of the positives about this. I actually, even though I picked this up for the world building, the on writing section was really what was so great for me and where I got the most use out of this book. Some of my personal favorite sections were foreshadowing, just because that's some of my favorite thing about writing, is like making all these little threads and tying things together, and it's something that I enjoy about writing, so I enjoyed about reading that. I think his stuff about prologues and first chapters could be really great, especially the prologues. You hear so many people give the advice like prologues are bad and, you know, don't do prologues, and they never really say why or give examples. Timothy gives really good examples of what makes a good prologue, when a prologue is necessary. Really great information that a lot of people don't talk about, and he gives great examples, and I really appreciated that. What I actually found super enlightening that I didn't think would be enlightening was the stuff about hero-villain relationships, that section, because that actually unlocked something for me with the rom-com I'm working on. So even though this is a sci-fi and fantasy kind of based book, it helped me unlock something for my rom-com, which, you know, completely different, and you wouldn't really think about it having a classic hero-villain relationship, and a lot of my books don't have really that big bad or that external baddie. So I didn't think I was going to get much out of that section, but I definitely did, and that's a section that I will be probably referring to a lot later in my future writings. Also, okay, the chosen one section. That was probably one that was a little more boring for me, because I don't tend to like the chosen one trope, so I don't put it in my writing. But that being said, if you're somebody who does like it and does write with that, he gives great examples of how to do that right and things to consider, how to not be off-putting to readers who aren't in love with the chosen one trope like I am, and how to execute that really nicely. My favorite part of the book, hands down, is the sections hard magic systems and soft magic systems. Even though I had binged those videos on his channel multiple times, I still got so much out of that, and I don't really understand why they were in the on writing section and not in the on world building section, because for me, magic systems are world building. It's integral to both the plot and the world, so I don't know why it wasn't in the world building section, but that's, again, a nitpick. If you haven't seen those videos or even his playlist, go check it out. Definitely 100% recommend. Even with seeing the videos, I got a lot out of that, and I will be referring to these sections time and time again in my writing. He very much used sort of Brandon Sanderson's laws of magic to sort of build off of, but he gave, again, a lot of good examples, a lot of good comparisons, and good things to consider while writing, and I appreciated that a lot. Then the on world building section actually ended up kind of falling a little bit more flat for me. He has the polytheistic, that's a hard word for me to say, religions with multiple gods, and I kind of wish there was more about different types of religions and not defocusing on that. Maybe we'll get that in volume 2, I don't know. And hidden magical worlds, that was good. And then there's the 3 sections about empires, how empires rise, how empires work, and how empires fall. And this was a big missed opportunity for me, because I think solely because of the choice of word empire. A lot of stories don't have an empire. I feel like that's kind of big sci-fi space operas or very high fantasy things which would have an empire, or people would feel connected to that term. But people may be writing contemporary fantasy or some of these other genres, they're not going to really feel connected to that term. And I wish he would have just used the term government. If he would have said governments, you know, that makes more sense for world building. It's more accessible. He talks about the 3 C's. communication, control, and commerce. And those would have been better sections for me, sort of government split into those 3 sections, and then maybe had a separate sections on doing the big empires. Again, maybe the volume 2 version is going to have some of that kind of stuff. I have no idea, but it would have been more accessible and easier to manage, because how it stands now, the 3 sections that he has about empires are a little bit convoluted and kind of boring, and they're not my favorite parts. I don't see myself really referencing back to those in the future. Overall, I would actually recommend this book for sci-fi fantasy writers, because there was a lot of great things. Just alone the stuff about sort of prologues and magic systems and the chosen one trope and how to do some of those fantasy conventions and norms in an effective way. It's worth it. Again, you have to take some of the stuff with a grain of salt, like, you know, that thing about self-publishing or kind of questioning the reader's intelligence. But that comes along. There's pros and cons with every craft book. Like, again, like with Story Genius, Lisa Cron saying she has a thing with traditional story structures and pantsers is also something I had an issue with, but this one hit a little bit deeper for me, and it's going to be a little bit tainted. I would pick up a volume 2 of this. The thing is, I kind of wish there was exercises in this. I come to learn about myself that I like the craft books that have exercises in this, and if Timothy put out a workbook to go along with this, I would definitely pick it up, and I think that's something he could consider doing, putting something like that out. But overall, I would pick it up if you're into sci-fi fantasy and into well, I don't know if I would really call it though a world building book, more of just sort of a sci-fi fantasy writing book, if I'm going to be honest. The bonus content that was included was just his planning method, his personal sort of plotting and planning method of his novels, and I actually thought that was kind of a nice little exclusive content. Just because as a writer, I'm very interested in knowing other people's process and methods. His wasn't anything shocking or anything, you know, that I haven't heard before. But again, I'm here on AuthorTube. I liked documenting my journey and watching other people's journeys. It's something that I find cool, and maybe somebody who's not familiar with some of those stuff could find that helpful. And again, he's very much like, don't believe in should, you can do it this way or that way, and I really like that type of language in these kind of books to say there is no one way of doing anything. So I thought that was kind of a nice little addition, a nice little bonus material that was put in there. So that's a wrap for this one. If you're into writing vlogs, writing experiments, and the occasional writing craft book talk, consider subscribing and staying tuned to what I have coming up, and I'll catch you in the next one.